Hello everybody, this is Jade. I was gonna do a neat joke with my cat relating to the whole rabbit thing, but she walked away because she's a cat, so just pretend it was unimaginably funny. So today we're covering chapters 4.1 through 4.9 of Pact. I know that sounds like not very much, but in my defense, I'm a slow reader. So at the start of 4.1, Blake is riding in a car with one of his lawyers, and the lawyer explains to him that Toronto is ruled by this dude named Conquest. But he's not really a dude. He's a personification of the idea of conquest. And he gets stronger as more and more conquest is going on in Canada, and weaker as things are not being conquered. So I feel like the secret to defeating these incarnations probably has something to do with the way that you discipline a child that wants attention, right? You reward a child with positive attention when they do good things, but you don't give them negative attention when they do bad things. You ignore them. So I do feel like I'm completely wrong based on the direction that Blake is taking to try to take down Conquest. But that's my theory at this point. The lawyer takes Blake back to his apartment, and he makes some innocuous comment, and Blake smiles. What is significant about this is I'm pretty sure Blake has not smiled at all his entire book. So, except for that one time when he was mad at Rose for trying to get him to read the really, really long book. That wasn't a real happy smile either. So, there you go. Mark it. 4.1. So, Blake's landlord, Joel, who seems to be the nicest guy in existence, arranges like a little party to celebrate Blake's return safely, haha. And we meet some of the friends that Blake has been talking about through this whole book. So there's Joel, the landlord, Amanda, the small, annoying one. There's Goosh, a large, intimidating woman. Ty, a skinny black man. Tiffany, who is Alexis's girlfriend. And then there's Alexis. Or should I say, and then there's Alexis. Because we get, like, several paragraphs of slow motion description of Alexis before we even find out what her name is. This is an interesting trait of men and boys in Wildbow's books, but specifically in his early books. Almost all of the good or neutral aligned men in Worm were completely head over heels for a woman. And then all of the bad guys were not. There were some variations to this, but you've got a lot of these long, several paragraph descriptions of how beautiful this man thought that this woman was, or whatever, and or how they liked her despite her flaws, or how they wanted her to see them a different way, or whatever. So, and this is something that has largely gone away by the time Ward came around. So it was pretty entertaining when Alexis came in and we went right back to that nigh worship flavor of male gaze that Wildbow used to lean a lot more into. So Alexis is the girl who somehow, we don't know the details, lifted Blake up out of the bad situation he was in shortly after he became homeless. She did his tattoos, so it appears that the reason that Blake loves his tattoos is is because he likes Alexis, or loves her, but you know, maybe not in a romantic way. He does like her in a romantic way, but it doesn't seem like he's obsessed with her. But he does love her as a person, and that is why he loves the tattoos that she did for him. And heartwarmingly, she has, it just says fucked up teeth. It's implied that it's some kind of history of drug use or something. It could be from some abuse or something. It's not really elaborated on, but she always hides the fact that she has these. She always hides her face and her teeth from even their large group of friends, but she seems completely comfortable and open with Blake, which is just really nice. The whole scene where Blake is talking to his friends and Alexis is just extremely pleasant because he is able to slip back into comfort so quickly. He doesn't feel like he needs to. He's not always thinking about not lying to them. He's thinking about not lying to them to protect them, and what he can tell them that will help them not be afraid for him. But all of his thoughts are about doing things for their sake and for being grateful that they're there. And it's really refreshing after 3 straight arcs of suspicion and deceit. But then, of course, the nameless practitioner Fel comes in and takes Blake off to talk with Conquest. And quite a lot of stuff happens in 4.2 when Blake is trying to appeal to Conquest to let him stay in Toronto for safety until he can go back to Jacob's Bell. But the gist of it is, it seems like Blake might have actually found a group of people he can get along with for about 2 pages. And then it falls apart. Get your hopes up. And then they go down. In fact, it is Jerry Meath, Sandra Duchamp's ex-husband, who is the one that really screws him over. And everybody knows that Jerry is everybody knows that Jerry is a non-partial player here and that he's just manipulating Blake, probably for the sake of his ex-wife. But nobody cares. Conquest doesn't care, Isidore doesn't care, Diana doesn't care. Blake cares, but nobody cares about Blake. So Conquest shoos everybody out and basically turns this room that they were in into a giant Thunderdome, because he can do that. He has some kind of advanced form of glamour that verges on reality warping, which it has been mentioned that advanced forms of glamour are basically reality warping. So that's not much of a surprise. And he is able to bring Rose into existence in the room, which is interesting because is she just imagining that she has a heartbeat and can feel cold? Has she been convinced by the illusion, or has reality really been warped? Is she really there? I don't know. But 4.3 starts and Rose tackles Blake. This happens with such intensity that I assumed that at first that Conquest had turned Rose into some kind of rage monster who was supposed to attack Blake or something, but no, it's just that Blake is extremely uncomfortable with being touched even, but grappled. And at this point I have to admit my screw up, I guess. So I knew a little bit about Pact going in because you know, being around the Wildbow community for a long time before I decided to read Pact, there's just some stuff that gets mentioned. You get a little bit of an idea of what it's about. I knew there was magic. And I knew that the protagonist had been raped, but somewhere along the way, I thought that it was that he gets raped in the middle of the story. So there have been very definite and clear hints up to this point that Blake had been raped before, but I just assumed that I wasn't interpreting it correctly. As of the conversation with Alexis in 4.1 and then this attempted hug by Rose in 4.3, it's excruciatingly clear that that Blake has been violently handled in the past, raped specifically, and he just breaks down. I want to talk about this for a minute because we learn a lot about the situation in this chapter as Blake effectively has a mental breakdown in the middle of this Thunderdome. It becomes apparent very quickly that Blake blames himself for his own rape entirely. He has never thought about the person who did this to him, but he also just seems to be a person who's not particularly prone to hate. He's more prone to thinking about himself and his own situation. So he blames himself for being emotionally vulnerable enough to get tricked into that situation. He blames himself for being too physically weak to escape. And he blames himself for being too mentally weak because we find out in this chapter that when it was happening, he froze. He didn't fight back or try to run away. He just shut down. And it also makes very clear why Blake never tried to go home. If this happened shortly after he left, he felt traumatized. He felt like a different person. It's difficult to go home when you feel like you're going to be a different person when you get there. He wants his family to reach out to him, sure, but he doesn't trust his family enough to treat him well in the wake of this, and he felt largely very helpless at the time. So it's not what I theorized last week that Blake would come to regret leaving. He already has. So what we've seen so far of Blake is that he always tries to avoid getting into a fight or flight situation because he knows that he will freeze. So yeah, that's most of what I have to say on the topic for now. But I'm sure there will be more later. But I want to talk about the rest of 4.3. Up to this point, I have felt like Pact is a book that I can like. Pact is a book that I'm excited to read more of. And when I get to interesting and exciting things in it, I think I'm gonna like this. 4.3 was the chapter where that changed for me to, I like this. I want to read this right now. I want to read what's going on at this point. And I feel like we're in it now. Like, this isn't the prologue anymore. But I also feel like I am more invested. And that started... that change largely came for me when... in the bit where Rose attacks him. But the rest of this chapter has another through line. So there's the through line of Blake's reaction to being in this situation in relation to his rape. But there's also, and of course there's the plot of Conquest trying to get them to summon a demon. But there's also there's the most development of Blake's relationship with Rose in this chapter. So up to this point, Blake has treated Rose as a person for sure. He never treats her as an object or as trash. But he does treat her and the other ghosts like he's a good regional manager who wants the best for his employees on the ground, but he doesn't feel close with them. Over the course of this chapter, Rose largely becomes a person to Blake. And maybe it has to do with the fact that they are standing side by side, and I do think that that's the root of it. But he didn't see her as a teammate, except for very occasionally. But over the course of the first and middle third of this chapter, they become like twins. They become equals and teammates who are able to communicate, not even communicate, but anticipate the other's actions and act on the actions that they believe the other will take. It's huge growth, and you can see Blake being able to work with this person, and you can see potential for a huge improvement in their teamwork in the future. But as part of this, Rose takes on the burden of the cuff that Conquest wants one of them to wear. It's like a one-sided handcuff with a chain that goes to Conquest at an infinite length, and Blake has a pretty much a complete breakdown at the idea of having to wear this. But Rose recognizes this and volunteers to take it, which is pretty impressive on Rose's part, because we know about what's going on in Blake's head because we're there, but Rose has seen like 3 data points and put it all together pretty quickly. So that's pretty impressive, especially for somebody with no friends. So Rose takes this cuff so that she is the one bound to Conquest, and Blake is extremely emotionally distressed when they leave. And it says as they leave that he is holding her hand, but he feels her hand crumble as they exit the doorway. And he is panicking, he's not doing well, and he goes up to a car and he kicks the mirror until the mirror comes off so that he can take Rose with him. And for the first time, as far as I can tell, he's not taking the mirror so that Rose can be with him and accompany him. He is taking the mirror because he wants somebody to be with him at this time when he feels overwhelmed. He wants Rose to be with him for him. And just as you're thinking that their relationship has improved so much, she asks what they are going to do about Conquest, and he realizes that he cannot tell her his plan because Conquest could know from the chain that connects her to him. So right when it seems like things could get so much better, that connection is taken away. At a time when Blake actually wants to share his plan with Rose, he can't. And he won't be able to for the foreseeable future until they get away from Conquest, which could be a very long time. But yeah, that chapter hit like a truck. Definitely the best Blake chapter so far. Maybe even surpassing the Sandra Duchamp interlude. I think it does. So Blake and Rose go home, and Blake turns the fairy hair so that Blake turns the fairy hair into paint, and then like puts it in a jar so that he can paint himself if he needs to. So he's basically becoming a magic tattoo artist, like Alexis. Just pointing that out. So Blake and Rose have to solve 3 demon problems in Toronto in 3 days, 1 per day, and they discuss briefly whether the human hosts of these spirits and stuff and the victims can be saved. And this is largely dismissed because the conversation is interrupted, but I really hope so. Blake is a person who started out, before the story starts, as a victim who was pulled up out of a bad place by his friends. And he got the support that he needed to become a happy person. Maybe not happy all the time, but he seemed like he was happy before all this stuff happened. And all of the practitioners, we're going to get into this later, but all of the practitioners that we have seen do not try to solve any problems. They never think about making anything better, and it is very frustrating to read. So I would appreciate it. This specific reader, Jade, would appreciate it if part of this story had to do with making some things better for some people. Maybe just a little bit. So then we get this interesting beat where Joel tells Blake that he invited people over to Blake's apartment to see how Blake would react and to sort of gauge how he's doing. And he expects that Blake gets this, and Blake is like, what? I didn't guess it. It occurs to me that Blake isn't good at seeing how people are manipulating him. And that's really bad. When he's looking to see how somebody's manipulating him, he almost never catches it. He just keeps asking questions until he catches the other person. He even said that he was manipulated emotionally into the situation that led to his rape. So I honestly would think that he would think about this more. But I'm glad he doesn't have trust issues. Or rather, I would be more glad if he didn't have... I would be more glad he doesn't have trust issues if he was not a practitioner. Or trust issues pertaining to, like, day-to-day interactions. He's obviously got the issues with physical contact, but I mean, like, socially. They mentioned that they can't claim a domain in Toronto where, because Conquest is the lord of it. Not that they would want to claim a domain in Toronto, but it's clear that they have to go back to Jacobsville. They are sheltering in Toronto for now, but they have to go back to Jacobsville. So Blake and Rose head to the site of the first demon infestation, which is actually an imp. And there's creepy animals all over the place, terrorizing the population, and everybody's scared, and the city hasn't done anything about it, and people are behaving really strangely, and they're mad at Blake for asking questions, and so Blake comes across this rabbit, and I really should have saved this bit so that I could read it, but basically what he does is he kills the rabbit, and he beheads it. Well, he rips its head off and, like, squeezes its guts out all over the pavement and, like, drags a big circle out on the pavement out of its guts and shit. And this keeps him safe from the crows and stuff. And I've seen a lot of people that are, like, really upset over the whole Thumper ordeal. And they're like, oh man, the part with the rabbit really stuck with me because that's super gross. Alright, listen guys. Rabbits are the most disgusting creatures. My family used to own a rabbit farm when I was younger. And it takes tremendous effort, like lots and lots of care and attention to keep them from eating their children. You will come up and you will find half-eaten rabbit babies if you don't do an absolutely perfect job, because the moms will eat their babies, the moms will kill the male rabbits. If they know each other too well, they'll just kill each other. If you leave the babies together too long, they'll kill each other. Rabbits are the worst. Don't be sad for Thumper. Be glad that he was able to do something for a human. Okay, maybe that was a little that was a little extreme. But the rabbits are terrible. Also, at this point, it becomes clear that only Rose can read any of the books in the library. Neat. People can see Rose, by the way, which is something that Blake has been careful to try to avoid showing people Rose up to this point, but then he just kind of forgot about it. And then he was surprised that somebody could see her. But I wasn't under the impression that people couldn't see her. After Blake is safe in the Thumper Circle, Rose shouts out, "I, Rose Thorburn, bid you to announce yourself. My line has dealt with others of your kind. Announce yourself or be diminished. You are not so strong you can ignore me." And I thought that it was really cool that we are at a point where Rose and Blake can even attempt something like this and look half decent while doing it. After a week, because, for the first several arcs, up until this point, Blake and Rose have felt completely helpless, and you just spend most of your reading time feeling sorry for them, and hoping that somebody feels bad enough for them that something good can happen. This is the first time I really felt like they could maybe help themselves. So, Powes of the Fifth Choir, Feral and Foul, is just a delightful character. He's awesome. Until he, of course, betrays Blake like everybody else and acts like a little shit. But, he doesn't know Pig Latin, and he looks like a baby, and I just found him extremely entertaining. They talked to Powes for a little while. I'm sorry, Poos. They talked to Poos for a little while, and then they head back to the university to try to talk to Isidora, the Sphinx, so that they can try to get some information, which apparently Conquest has secured the information that they need to be able to bind these demons. But he refuses to give it to them. I'm going to have some comments on this later, but Isidora also refuses to help them. But before they get to Isidora, they're cornered by a bunch of Jeremy's goons, the Dionysus frat boys, and Rose breaks a couple windows trying to catch Isidora's attention. And Isidora is able to actually chase away the frat boys of Dionysus, but it does knock Rose out, and at the end of this section, she's still knocked out. Interestingly, Blake also meets up with Tiffany, Alexis's questionably girlfriend, and he asks her out for coffee, and then immediately after Rose gets knocked out and they get turned down by Isidora, they go out on a little date, which I understand is partially to allow Blake to protect himself against Dionysus, or against Dionysus's hench people, but it's really for Blake's sake. So he and Tiffany go get coffee at what appears to be like the university coffee shop, and they just sit and talk for a couple minutes, and they don't seem like a perfect match, but they get along fine. And I thought it was super interesting that Blake can just shut it off. He's watching mirrors to see if Rose wakes up, but that's it. He goes from high stress situation to let's go on a date with a cute girl in very short time, and he's able to relax quite a bit. Interesting. They spend a little bit of time talking about Alexis, and I like Alexis a lot. We haven't seen very much of her, but Tiffany and Blake talk about her for a little while, and they talk about how her whole deal is just finding people who need help and doing her best to help them. And in my books, that makes her the best character in this whole story. Everybody else is running around just wanting power and all that stuff. But Alexis just wants to make her friends' lives better. So you know how I said I wasn't going to care about any of the people that Rose or Blake liked? Well, I care about Alexis. So Blake goes back, gets Poos, binds him to a book. It all goes to shit. He and June barely escape with their lives. He annoys the shit out of Fel. And then they take Poos back to Conquest. And Conquest makes fun of Blake. It's just pathetic, right? Making fun of Blake's Diabolist abilities is like making fun of the disabled kid. It doesn't make you look cool. Like, even if you're in bad company, it's pointless. So Blake asks for some more resources, and he explains to Conquest, like, yeah, I really need some of this stuff so I can actually do my job. And Conquest is like, okay, sure. And Fel goes, wait, what if we don't give him anything? And Conquest is like, oh shit, you're right. Make do for the time being. This is like middle school management 101. You can't have an office if you don't have any paper. So I thought about this for a while, and it's because he sees Blake as a conquest right now. He's already conquered Fel, so he's willing to listen to him. But Blake is still someone who has not utterly bowed to Conquest. And it's just petty and stupid. And that's how I feel about most of the people in this book. So then Blake goes home, and he's sort of like, he retreats into this borderline self-harm to get himself clean. Like, he gets in the shower and he like scrubs himself raw, and then he pours chemicals on himself, gets back in the shower to get the chemicals off, because he would rather be in pain that he inflicted on himself than have evidence that anyone else hurt you or touched you. Even in this case, dogs and squirrels and stuff. The real danger that he has from creatures like that is like rabies. And he doesn't even think about that. He thinks about wanting to get himself clean. He even covers himself up with glamour so that he feels more unhurt. And I almost said it's a really interesting character trait, but it's not. That's what real people are like. So at this point, Blake looks at his tattoos again, and I still have no idea what the tattoos symbolize as far as like magically, but he cares about the tattoos because he cares about Alexis, and Alexis is the one that pulled him out of homelessness and trauma and helped him to become a stable person. So the tattoos represent stability. Like that feels really weak. That's just my best guess right now. I'll keep guessing. So Blake missed a couple of calls or a couple of visits from Paige, and he calls her back. And this conversation is extremely disappointing. So I, the reader, and Blake, because I got this opinion from Blake, felt this little bit of relief from the fact that Paige was at the end of the line, right? Of people who can inherit the house. Because it seems like Paige would be the best fit, right? She's a law student, she pays attention to semantics, she seems nice, but in a time of crisis, she's more interested in just arguing than actually finding the truth. She doesn't make any real attempts to try to get the situation out of Blake. She just wants to poke holes in his sentences, which would seem like a good practitioner trait, but she doesn't deal well in a crisis, so she would fall apart. She says that she staked everything on this stupid game of who gets the house, but that's almost like saying, I dedicate my life to winning the lottery this one time. Yeah, you have better chances at getting the house, but I mean, she has so many other opportunities. I mean, she's in law school. It's not like she doesn't have a future without some stupid house. She also seems to have put the most on this game among the girls, which, from what Rose has said, can get extremely ugly. So it seems like she was perpetuating that bullshit. During the party at Blake's apartment at the beginning, Rose seems wistful and sad that she never got to have friends the same way that Blake did. Paige, on the other hand, just wants money. So in other words, Rose Sr. was right. Using Molly as padding stunk, but it seems like Rose and Blake are genuinely the best plan. Rose and Blake have argued several times for why none of the other girls in line for inheriting the house could possibly deal with the pressure of what that entails, except for maybe Paige. But, Paige would probably do okay. After this conversation, I'm convinced she would just die immediately. She would go cry in a corner when she realized that it's not what she expected. And then while she was in that corner, somebody would just slit her throat. It also makes Rose look a little bit better in comparison because Paige is obsessed with the stupid game between the girls. And Rose largely shares Blake's utter lack of interest in inheriting the house. She has never once mentioned wanting to be the person Granny picked, right? She just wanted her brakes to not get cut. So then Blake goes and gets in the car with Fel, and see, I made fun of Fel on Discord previously because Blake asks him what his job is or whatever, and he says, "Oh, I do the cleaning and detailing." And I was like, well, he must suck at his job because the only thing he ever does is bitch when Blake asks for help. He doesn't handle any details. He just has details written in his job description. But after Blake gets in his car, I understand. Fel's car has been completely cleaned of all the fleas and mud from yesterday. Fel's job is cleaning and detailing his own car. That's it. So the last point I want to make is this conversation, which just sums up all the problems I have with this book. Not that I think this makes the book worse. I'm not complaining about the quality of the book. But the problem that I have with the world of Pact. Blake says something to Fel about break it down into awareness and knowledge. There are a lot of things where being aware is shitty. Being aware of how many kids die in Africa is one thing. Being knowledgeable about it implies you know enough to do something about it. So this is a pretty neutral opinion of Blake, right? Like this isn't some heroic opinion, and it's not a shitty one either. He just says, if you know a lot about helping the starving children in Africa, you should try to help them, which is just like bare minimum human decency. And Fel responds, or your knowledge empowers you to make others aware, and you make their existence a less happy one. So, in other words, if you know that there are children dying in Africa, you should not tell anybody because that will just make them miserable. And that just sent me down this rabbit hole where I was thinking about, I hate every single practitioner in this story, minus Blake and Rose and potentially Maggie. No one in the whole practitioner world thinks solving problems is good. It's all about A, becoming more powerful, and B, shoving your problems off onto somebody else, which almost always ends up just coming back around to you. So, topical. So right now we're in this coronavirus quarantine thing where nobody's allowed to leave their house. And the practitioner world is the equivalent of you saying, you know what? everybody might be getting this virus. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make sure the people down the street get the virus before I do, because then they'll have it and I won't. But what it actually does is it places you at risk for getting it, you idiot. That is what everybody in this whole book is like. They're just like, you know what? I'm gonna make a deal with Conquest. And then Conquest won't like eat me or some shit. And then you got Laird Behame, who's like, you know what, there's this new kid in town. I'm gonna try to get him eaten on the very first day. Poor little dude. So Fell answers my question though, because he talks about the other members of his family who have served Conquest, which it's not their choice. They all serve Conquest. And he says that all the ones that were nice or tried to take mercy on any of Conquest's victims or whatever, they all just died. And it's clear that this world is kill or be killed. There's no gray area. There's no room to try to do anything else. So I understand that not every story can be my idealist fantasy, but this utter lack of effort on the part of anyone who is involved is frustrating and angering. But I have hope that this whole book isn't going to be just people being shitty to each other for 3,500 pages, because we do have characters like Tiffany and Alexis and Ty. Ty offered to put down tape in Blake's apartment. That is the nicest thing anybody has done in this whole book. But there are those nice things that are happening. And Blake thinks about his friends all the time. So I have confidence that, the ending might be bleak, the middle might be bleak, but at least there are some people I can be rooting for, I guess. So that's all I read this week. Let's see how far I get next week. I am going to talk every episode about something that I learned from this book. This is not a Pact exclusive point, but I want to talk about the protagonist's assertiveness, specifically in the romantic sense. So, when Alexis walks into the room at the beginning, and Blake stares at her longingly, she asks him if he wants to have a threesome, and he says no, and he admits to her that he still likes her. It seems that she turned him down at some point, but not sure. But I was really impressed by the fact that he just goes out and says, hey, I still have feelings for you. And then later on in, I think, 4.5, he makes this snap judgment that he wants to ask Tiffany out to coffee, and then they go out on a date like 5 minutes later. He never thinks about how he's nervous or anything like that. He never thinks about how he looks. And this is a pretty common trait in wild book protagonists. I don't know about Sylvester, but I do know that Taylor and Victoria are both very open with the people that they're interested in, and they'll just go up and say, hey, I like you. Want to bang, or whatever. And that's a trait that I don't have at all. So in college, there was this boy that I liked in my robotics team, and at the time of this story, I had liked him for, I think, 1 year and 3 months, so quite a while. And we went on winter break, so I didn't see him for a month. He was pretty much an acquaintance. He was a guy that I knew, but we didn't hang out super often. So the first time that I saw him after winter break, so I hadn't seen him for a month, was at one of these robotics meetings. And in the room, there were these 2 big tables, right? So there was nothing on the floor other than these 2 big tables, and you sat at one of the 2 big tables, and each table sat like 16 people. And there were 9 people at this meeting, including me. So I was the last person to get there, and and the other 8 people were sitting at the one table, They could seat 16 people. But I didn't want to appear too desperate by sitting at the same table as him. So I sat at the opposite table, alone. And I sat by myself at that opposite table alone for about 3 hours because I didn't want to appear desperate by sitting at the same table as the boy I liked. So I find the protagonists of Wild Bow stories very inspiring because it reminds me that when I do behavior like that, even if it does make me look desperate, that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? There's nothing wrong with just saying, hey, I like you. Want to go out. Will I ever develop that trait? I don't know. So next week, I'll be starting on 4.10. Definitely be finished Arc 4, but I'd also like to be finished with Arc 5. We'll see. So see you next week.